Hi there. I want you to think about some new technology. Put it in your mind. What was the last time that you were excited about some new technology? And what exactly was it? Was it the opportunities that serverless presents to us? Have you played around with serverless at all? When was the first time that you heard about it? Did someone share an example of how you can do serverless for you? What about Docker or Node? All kinds of different tools that we come across in our day-to-day, looking for different ways to build awesome applications, awesome infrastructure. Maybe it was some new language. Maybe it was Rust, Go, a new framework, possibly Angular or React. Or maybe you can still remember how you felt when you first tried out GitHub and pushed your own code up to a repository. Maybe it was something like Kubernetes, where you start to orchestrate all these containers that we're looking at. Or it could even be a simple service that isn't something you built, but you rely on all the time, like ride sharing. For me, recently it was seeing how accessible AI and cognitive services have become. In fact, there's a lot of work that me and my team have been working on in the realm of artificial intelligence and machine learning that is really starting to open up the door to some interesting stuff that you can do. Okay, so you're thinking back on what that technology is. You got it in your mind now. How did you learn about it? Was it someone at work that showed you? Maybe a friend or family member? Maybe they shared with you via an email or a text and said, hey, check this out. Or maybe you learned about it on some blog or a video. What problem was it trying to solve for you? And how are you better now at whatever it is you're trying to accomplish? At any given moment, someone is sharing something that they suddenly can't live without, and they're doing it with someone else. What compels you to share something with someone else? Well, typically, it's because it makes them feel good about how they perform. It's helping them feel amazing about themselves. It helps them do and be more. It enables them. In this video, I want to talk to you about how you can empower your users through some of the things that we learn in site reliability engineering. My name is Jason Hand. I'm a senior cloud advocate at Microsoft, and I'm excited to talk to you about some of the things that we've been talking about in site reliability engineering for years that hopefully you can adopt into your own practices. The fact is, we share new tech with our friends simply because we like our friends. We want them to be amazing too, just like us. And fans of new tech, they don't share things with friends just because they want to. They actually want people to be amazing too. Now let me give you a few examples of some tools that I use all the time to illustrate this. There's a tool out there called Camera Plus I use on my phone all the time. I'm a big photographer. I like to take awesome pictures all the time. And if I can use an application that will enhance those pictures, it makes me a better photographer. Also in the realm of photography, I've recently discovered these 360 cameras. I take them with me all over the place, and I'm creating these awesome, fun videos about all the different adventures that I take all around the world, and then I share those with my friends and family. And they, again, can't believe some of the stuff that I'm making. It's so simple though. It's really the technology. I do a ton of traveling. I have to go to all kinds of different events, and TripIt is really the only way that I can keep straight on my schedule and agenda. If it wasn't for TripIt, I wouldn't be able to do my job as well as I do currently. The same can be said about ride-sharing applications. These services allow me to get to places on time and therefore allow me to be better at my job. It's just a better version of me. Another one that I use quite often is a service called TimeShifter. As you're moving across different time zones around the world, TimeShifter has helped coach me on what I need to do to make sure I alleviate as much jet lag as possible. Again, it makes me a better version of me. Earlier this year in New York at SRECon, I found out that there were some really great talks around not only site reliability engineering, but also the relationship to our product teams, which is a very, very promising conversation to have. It's because when it comes to product management, their main focus is on what and why. What are our customers trying to accomplish and why? What problem is it solving for them? The number one rule for anyone in product management is to know your users. We want to try to understand them as best as possible so that we can, well, understand their hearts and their minds and provide whatever it is that we can to make them better versions of themselves. But it's not reliable if it can't deliver on that promise. So when we start talking about reliable systems, it's not always just about the tech. Knowing that, people will often come to me and say, well, where should we start monitoring? And usually, I give them the advice of, well, what do your users care about? What are they trying to accomplish? This will give you a sense of what it is that they actually care about. I can tell you from personal experience that the technical stack of what's running your service and what's running your application is usually of little importance to your customer. In fact, they typically don't even know. If we look at just a basic architectural design, we can see almost any system out there is going to have your client, it's going to have your web tier, it's going to have all kinds of different elements for the service itself. Traditionally, we just monitored for our technical components. The things that are really just the known knowns. We understand that if the network isn't working, that's going to impact our infrastructure. It's going to impact our applications, it's going to impact the services that we're trying to provide. Those would be known knowns. But the fact is, there's always going to be things that we didn't anticipate, we didn't even know could happen. And when you start talking about the cloud, that's even more prevalent. The cloud changes everything. In fact, some of the things I like to remind myself every once in a while, especially when I'm building things that start to actually look like they're working, is don't get too comfortable. In a complex system, there's always change and there's always room for things to, well, go wrong. Nearly 80% of all life on Earth is found under the ocean's surface. The ocean contains 99% of the living space on the planet, but yet less than 10% of that space has been explored by humans. There's so much that we don't know. These are the things that we like to refer to as unknown unknowns. You don't know what you don't know. Let me share a story with you. An online retailer missed out on tens of thousands of dollars from orders placed on Black Friday simply because the cart checkout wasn't accepting American Express. Operations teams were monitoring for failed components of the credit card system but had no idea it, quote, suddenly couldn't handle American Express. Now, I'd like for you to think, what is more important? What has bigger impact to the business value? Keeping tabs on computers or keeping tabs on the orders? Before we continue, let me give you a definition of what we mean by site reliability engineering. An engineering discipline devoted to helping an organization sustainably achieve the appropriate level of reliability in their systems, services, and products. That's what we call site reliability engineering, and there's a lot that goes into it. When you start thinking about reliability, typically availability is what most people think of. But reliability has a lot more to do than just availability. It's about latency, coverage, throughput, correctness, fidelity, durability, and lots of other things that roll up into, is your service reliable for the end users or not? Reliability isn't just about, like I said, the technical components. It's about keeping your business healthy. It's the reliability of business value. We're trying to find ways to create these, what we call virtuous feedback loops. And one way that we do that in site reliability engineering is through an idea called service level indicators. How are things going? What's happening within our system? At any given point in time, it's important for us to have some sort of metrics that tells us an indication of what the system is doing. Now, if an SLI or a service level indicator is new to you, let me show you how you can calculate a very simple SLI. The way that it's done is that we look for metrics over the course of time. And we have to also be very specific about where these metrics are coming from. If we're talking about availability, let's say from a load balancer, we also have to say we want to look at it over the course of, let's say, 6 hours, for an example. So in this example, let's say we have, over the course of 6 hours, 100,000 total requests. Of those 100,000, 2,000 of them failed, leaving 98,000 successful requests. 98,000 over 100,000, some basic math, shows us that that is 98% availability. And we can display that information in lots of different ways so that we can, at any given point, see how our system is doing through these indicators. Now that we have an idea about service level indicators, let's talk about service level objectives. A service level objective is basically what I like to refer to as your line in the sand. This is where if something passes this threshold, it is time to get people involved. Now, service level objective can simply be just one static number. So if we look at an SLO aligned with an SLI, we can see that while our SLIs kind of go up and down, the SLO stays static. And in this example, it's about the third hour, or maybe actually between the second and third hour, that our SLIs dip below our threshold. It's at that point it's time to get someone involved. So if we think back to our story about the abandoned carts, in our shopping cart example, we may have a service level indicator that measures the total number of abandoned carts as measured by the credit card processing system, and let's say maybe over 30 minutes. And as an objective, we may determine what is a reasonable number of abandoned shopping carts over those 6 hours. What are we going to be comfortable with? And most of you may be thinking, well, wouldn't it be 0? That seems better than 1. The chances of you paging an engineer quick enough after even just one shopping cart problem is actually very, very low. Just because it happened once doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen again either. One of the things we like to talk about in SRE is that everything we do is data-driven. So we're looking at numbers, very concrete numbers, to make sure that we're doing the right things to improve our overall reliability. So in our abandoned cart scenario, we've determined that 2 abandoned carts over the course of 6 hours is where we want to establish our service level objective. It's at that point we'll get people involved. The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we delivering on the value that we promised? Regardless of the technology, regardless of the application, the language, all the different tools, what is it we're trying to provide for our users, and are we delivering on that? That takes us back to the reliability of business value. So, if you're a business leader, or even just an engineer writing software, what is it that you're worried about when it comes to the systems and the services that you're building? Are you worried about the computers that they run on? Or are you worried about the users and how they use their system and how they get value out of it? Have you ever stopped to think, what keeps you up at night about the things that you're building? What are you currently monitoring? What is the observability of the systems that you build right now? And what is the value that you're trying to provide? And on top of that, what is it even like as a user to use your system? And what could you be capturing that would tell you even more? What part of your system actually isn't that observable? Although you might be able to detect issues, you really can't figure out what's going on in a timely manner. And what engineering effort is actually going to be required to fill those blind spots? Do you have an incident response plan? When the SLO is breached, how do people know what they're going to do? Is there a sense of urgency throughout your engineering organization that when these SLOs are breached or when something is wrong, that we actually take action and respond in a calculated way? Are you putting your engineers on call, or are you letting others actually bear the burden of keeping systems up and running? So how do we do this? Well, it kind of depends on the system and the services that you're trying to build and provide. The good news is reliability is everyone's job. It's not something that gets dumped onto just operations. It's not something that just gets dumped onto your site reliability engineering teams. It's something that even as an engineer who doesn't typically have a lot of roles with on-call or dealing with things in production environments, it's something that we all have to think about. Reliability is everyone's job. Good news is that allows us to experiment with different ways that we can provide more reliable business value to our systems. One thing that I like to encourage is asking lots of questions. Allow for your engineers to take deep dives on how the system actually works. A lot of this can actually come out of a really good retrospective analysis or a post-incident learning review. And the point of all this is that we are going to be able to increase our observability simply by having discussions about what's going on the technical aspects as well as the process and the people. So here's my advice for service level indicators and service level objectives. Start having those conversations about what's important, what it is that you're trying to build and the value you're trying to deliver to your users, and how can that be reflected in a service level indicator, and how can we set objectives so we know when something's not right, it's time to get people involved. Once you have your SLIs and your SLOs and you've rolled those out and engineers are starting to play around and experiment with those, make sure that you constantly push out the idea that this is all about continuously improving things. You're never going to get it right on the first go. Establish your SLIs, establish your SLOs, make sure that those are tied closely to the value you're trying to provide your users so that they can be awesome, like we talked about earlier. And from there, continuously improve and find ways to iterate and make things better. I hope you've enjoyed this video on site reliability engineering and how you can empower your users and make them awesome just through a couple simple concepts of SLIs and SLOs. And I look forward to talking to you again. Thanks.